All right, Rabbi say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. I apologize for the little bit of a later start. I'll tell you actually something very beautiful. So in one of my other roles, I'm involved in a boys' yeshiva here in town, YMC, Yeshivas Makar Chaim, and this morning, Tamir Goodman ran a basketball clinic for the basketball team at YMC, together with a group of boys from the inner city. It was such an incredible Kiddush Hashem. Such a Kiddush Hashem. And the opportunity, it's a fascinating thing. The golden life is to be able to build bridges with all different parts of community. And Baruch Hashem, the opportunity to see different communities, right? Different types of minority communities come together over a shared language of sports is really a fascinating thing, a beautiful, dynamic, and incredible Kiddush Hashem. Halavai. So many more things like this should happen, and the bonds between all parts of our greater community should be built stronger. So we'll say so again, but I apologize. That was my excuse. I think it's a pretty solid excuse, by the way, as far as excuses goes. I think this definitely, by the way, much better than what I've heard from most of you. I'm just gonna put that out there. Anyway, okay, we'll say with that, let us begin. No, that I don't do. I didn't even loosen my tie. All right, so let's begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Josh and Becca Friedman for dedicating all the shurim this month. Leili Nishmas Josh's father Yisrael Yehuda Ben Harav Chaim Rafael. To thank Semi and Malka Esterson for dedicating the shurim memory of their parents. Yitzchak Leib Ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, the continued Gesund and Hatzlach of Mr. Morton Esterson, Admei Ve'esim Shanim Tovos. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the shurim this month, the commemoration of the yahrzeit of Shmuel's brother, Yosef Pepper, Yosef David Zichron Levracha Ben Yaakov. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Ayal and Sarah Steinberg, in the schus of Refuah Shlema for Shulamis Basusha, Hillary Jacobson Kent, and Akiva Kent, in memory of Hillary's father, Harold Mitnick Tzvi Hirsch Ben Chanoch Zichron Levracha. And to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, the Birnbaum family, in honor of Bernard's birthday, Baruch Hashem, Emeretz Hashem Yishabizocha Ameh Ve'esim Shanim Tovos. Rabbi, with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is daf mem. We left off, Rabbi, say, on the bottom of, again, continuing on the sugya of Bikur Cholim, which we began yesterday. We left off yesterday on the bottom of Lamed Tes Amud Beis 39b. Rabbi Chanina. So we'll say it's 2, 4, 6 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina. Anyone who goes in and visits a sick person, notal echad mishishim tzaro, takes 1/60th of his tsar, 1/60th of his pain. So the Gemara says, now we'll say, it's interesting. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Amar le imkain leo shisin belukme, why not go ahead and have 60 people come in and visit him at once, thereby removing all of his illness? So the Gemara says, Amar le ki isuraisa debe Rabbi Nosson. So ultimately, debe Rabbi. This is also actually, this takes us back to our Ksuvas days. This is like the Isfiraisa, the 1/10 of the estate, like we had by Rabbi Nosson. Rabbi say, we'll get to that in just a moment. So the Gemara says, so essentially, this is actually very interesting, because we're all familiar with this idea. It's actually Gemara Maseches Brachas as well. The Gemara Maseches Brachas, the lashon over there is Kala Mavakir Chola Notal Echa Mishishim Bechelyo. Goes, if a person visits a sick person, ultimately, again, they go ahead and they take 1/60th of his illness. Here, it's 1/60th of his tsar. And I will say, the Gemara is teaching us a very profound idea. Tsar, right? Tsar is pain. Pain can be physical, pain can be emotional. What Chazal are sensitizing us to is that sometimes when a person is suffering, the only thing worse than suffering is suffering alone. And when you go ahead and the person is in pain and you are there and you're there with them, even if you do not go ahead and take a piece of their illness, you absolutely take a piece of their tsar. And even if it's a very small piece of their tsar, maybe it's only 1/60th, but the knowledge that when I'm struggling, I'm not struggling by myself. The knowledge that when I'm struggling, someone else there is alongside me. The knowledge that when I'm having pain, ultimately at the end of the day, someone is there to hold my hand, that helps take away some small amount of the tsar I'm experiencing. So the Gemara says, Ube ben Gilo. However, where does this work? Where does this work? Ben Gilo. Now, I will say, Ben Gilo is interesting. If you look at the Ran says Ben Gilo, second to last line, Shenolod hamavaker b'mazalo shalchola. We'll say, when does it work that the person who's visiting takes 1/60th of the tsar? Only if the visitor was born under the same astrological sign as the person who is ill. Rashi, on the other hand, understands, Ben Gilo, Bacher Kamoso, O Zakein lezakein. Ben Gilo means someone the same age. We'll say, so if we go ultimately with Rashi's interpretation, it's actually very profound. Sometimes, so if we go with the idea that when you visit a sick person, you take 1/60th of their tsar, the recognition that at the end of the day, you're there for someone, and therefore the knowledge that they're not alone, by definition, removes some of the tsar. So Rabbi say that's most acutely felt with someone who could relate to what it is that you're going through. We'll say, right, sometimes people are going through suffering or people are going through difficulties, and I can't relate to what it is that they're going through. But Rashi's pointing out over Ben Gilo means someone your age, right? Someone in your stage of life. When someone who, I will say this happens to all of us, you hear something dramatic or tragic about something happening to someone much older. It's okay, they're much older. You hear it happening to someone your age, suddenly again, it's what's the word, strikes home? In other words, it's so much closer to my heart because I can relate to it. So Rashi's saying something amazing over here. When is it that a visit can be most impactful and remove some level of the tsar of the person who is ill? The Ben Gilo, with someone who could relate to the tsar of the person who is suffering. Now, to be clear, the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is no matter what age or no matter what stage the visitor is. And anytime you go to visit someone who's sick, that's a mitzvah. But the ability to shoulder someone else's pain along with them often is someone who's in the same stage of life, who could truly relate to what the person who is suffering is undergoing. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. Good, that's Ben Gilo. The sign Rebbe Omer Basani Zoros Minichse Achin. So this is what we were saying before. A daughter who is supported from the estate of her brothers, Notelas Isra Nechasim, takes 1/10 of the estate as her dowry. Amrlo the Rebbe said Rebbe Ledvaracha, Mishesh La Esra Banos Ubain, someone who has 10 daughters and 1 son. Einol Leben B'Makom Bonus Klum. The son will get nothing because each daughter gets a 10th. The son will be left with nothing. Amr lahem rishonon natalis isra neschasim shnir b'mashe shayra shlishis b'mayin shayra v'chal yaris v'chal kos b'shav. No. What it means is daughter number 1 takes a 10th, right, for her dowry. Then daughter number 2 takes what? A 10th of what's left. Daughter number 3 takes a 10th of what's left. So there's always something left over. The Gemara is bringing this in because it's the same way. When you go to visit someone, you take a 60th of their tsar, of their pain and suffering away. So again, it's not the pshat that if 60 people converge on the chola at once, Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov, he's cured. But rather, again, what it means is each one takes a successive 60th from the remaining illness. Much in the same way that we saw by the dowry case. Incredible. Rav Chelbo, let's listen to this case. Rav Chelbo Cholash. Rabbi Chelbo got sick. Nofik Achriz Rav Kahana, top of Mem. Rav Chelbo Bosh. So Rav Kahana went out, and he announced, Rabbi Chelbo is sick. Lo Ika de Kaasi. No one came to visit. And I'll say, what's the pshat? Right? What's the pshat? No one came to visit Rabbi Chelbo. See, Rabbi say, we know what the pshat is. We hear about people who are in need all of the time. Why is it that so often we don't answer the call? It's not because we don't care. It's not because we're not empathic. It's because we're busy. Or we perceive that we're too busy. Right? So people get caught up in their own lives. When you get caught up enough in your own life, you hear things, but you don't internalize it. So people hear that Rabbi Chelbo is sick. But again, all right, okay, I'm certainly going to daven for him. But Lamais, I got to go to work. I have this, I have that. So no one visits. So what happened? So lo ike de kaasi amar lahu lo kach haymais betamid echa min talmid Rabbi Akiva. So they said there was once an episode with one of the talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. Shechala lo nichnesu chachamim levakra. So Rabbi Akiva had a talmid who was ill. None of his rabbinic colleagues came to visit him. V'nichnas Rabbi Akiva levakra. Rabbi Akiva came in to visit. Ubishvil shekibdo v'ribtzo lefanav chaya. And because Rabbi Akiva literally went ahead and swept, I will say ribtzo means when they had dirt floors, so you would sprinkle water on the floor in order to keep the dirt settled. So Rabbi Akiva came in and Rabbi Akiva went ahead and scrubbed. He sprinkled and he swept. And I will say, I'll point out to you, if you look at the rush for just a moment, the rush is in the bottom right-hand column, about 5 lines into the rush. He says, Shekib dover rib tzolafanov, lifnei achola b'tzivei Rabbi Akiva. So the Rush just points out, it doesn't necessarily mean that Rabbi Akiva himself went ahead and swept, but rather Rabbi Akiva came in, he saw that sweeping and sprinkling needed to be done, so he made sure to get someone to provide this service. The Rush says, you see from here an incredible aspect of Bikur Cholim. Ki hanichnas levakir asachola mifakeach al tzrachav u'mechayehu. The Rush explains, what is the primary essence of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim? What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to see if the chola is taken care of. In other words, why do I go to visit a sick person? To look around, to see, is everything in place? Does he have what he needs to eat? Does he have what he needs to drink? Is the house kept? Is the temperature okay? Is there enough light? That's the mitzvah. So Rabbi Akiva goes in and he sees no one's swept. No one sprinkled the floor. See, he goes ahead and does this, or has someone do it. Amrlei, Rabbi Yechi's sonny. So the Talmud said, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, you gave me life. Right? What the Talmud was saying was, Rabbi, no one has come to visit me, and therefore, by definition, no one has really seen to the needs of the household. Yatsa Rabbi Akiva v'darash. Rabbi Akiva went out and he darshaned. Kol mi she'ein mevakir cholim, ki'ilu shofech damim. Wow. Rabbi Akiva says, if you don't do Bikur Cholim, it's like you're shedding blood. Now I will say, obviously, this is a bit hyperbolic. Rashi says over here, ki'ilu shofech damim, mipnei shebnei adam shenichnasen levakro, osim lo lechol kol tzracha. I will say, this is really incredible. And what you begin to see is something really amazing, which is the Gemara is really building up the concept of Bikur Cholim. So, in other words, just on Amud Beis, you see the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is this idea that when you visit someone who's sick, by definition, you provide empathy, you provide compassion, and that goes ahead and removes some of the tsar of the person who's suffering. Now the Gemara says, there's also a very utilitarian aspect to Bikur Cholim, which is you go and you see, does the person need anything? Does the person need anything? And if they do need something, I'm going to spring into action and ultimately do for them. Incredible. So when Rav Dimi came along, he said, anyone who goes ahead and visits the sick causes him to live. I will say, same idea, because when you go to visit the sick, you're able to see what they need, and by definition, you're able to go ahead and provide for them. And I will say, if you don't visit the sick, you cause them to die. So the Gemara says, whoa, let's talk about this. So the Gemara says, my grama, what does it mean if you visit them, you're causing them to live, and if you don't visit them, you're causing them to die? What is this causation? Maybe it means like this. Anyone who goes to visit a sick person ultimately davens for them that they should live. And whoever does not go ahead and do Bikur Cholim, will daven that he should die. So the Gemara says, really? Is that true? That at the end of the day you'll daven for a person to die? The Gemara says like this. Ein mevakish alav rachamim lo sheyichya v'lo sheyamos. I will say it's incredible. What the Gemara says is like this: is that if you don't visit a person who is ill, you don't become sensitized enough to their condition, and therefore you don't really daven. Now I will say what's riveting about this Gemara is if you look at the lashon, it's very incredible. If you don't visit the sick, kol she'ein mevaker chola, ein mevakish alav rachamim, you won't daven for compassion. Lo sheyichya, that he should live, or that he should die. We will say, look at the Ran. Get ready for this. Top Ran, left-hand column. Nira be'ene dehachi kamer. Look what the Ran says. So we will say, what's strange about the wording of the Gemara? The Gemara makes it sound like there's a time to daven for a person to live, and there's a time to daven for a person to die. So the Ran says something amazing. Nira be'ene dehachi kamer. Pamim shetzarech levakish rachim ala chola sheyamos. I will say there is a concept of davening for a person to die. There is a concept like this. When says Duran, Kigon shemitztaer hachola bechal yoharbe, v'efsher lo sheyichya. If you see that a person is dramatically ill, and there is really no reasonable way that they are going to survive the illness, and all that's happening is pain and suffering, Ultimately, again, you could daven for the person to die. And the Ran gives examples of this. Ultimately, this happened with Rebbe, his maidservant. So I will say, if you skip down a little bit, "Umishum hachi ka'amar damavakir chole mo'ilo b'tfilaso afilu lachios v'pnei she'tfila yoser mo'eles u'mishe'enu mavakir ein tzarach lomar she'enu mo'eles." So I will say, see, the idea over here is like this. So the Gemara is saying two things. Number one, you truly only know the situation of a person if what? If you visit. I would say it's the Eino Dome Shmiya Kiriya, right? Nothing ever replaces seeing something for yourself to understand the totality of the event. But I will say what the Ran is sensitizing us to, and this is a very difficult idea in halacha, which is sometimes when a person is suffering terribly, and there is no natural way for this person to have a refuah, you are allowed to daven for a person to die. Now I will say what's interesting about this concept is we have two competing concepts. The Gemara Maseches Brachos brings down that afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavaro shel adam al yimanes atzmo min harachamim. Even if a person has a sharp sword against his neck, don't give up on divine compassion. Which sounds like no matter how terrible things look, you always have to believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could come through. And yet here the Gemara is saying you're allowed to daven for someone to die if they are in a terrible, terrible situation. So I will say, this is probably sometimes like one of the most difficult things to navigate. Because can Hashem perform miracles? Absolutely. Can Baruch Hu turn around the most dire looking of situations? Absolutely. Does that happen more often than not? No. In other words, the world, olam kimin hago noheg, right? So most people with an end-stage terminal illness die. That's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses to allow the world to function in a certain natural order. That's the way that it works. So it's this interesting idea theologically that I have to believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could turn around anything at any time, but at the same time, the world also works in a natural order. So I will say, I'll tell you, someone who's been involved in a lot of these types of situations, and families often ask, what should we daven for? Do you daven for a refuah shalema when someone is clearly objectively dying? There's no medical remedy, there's no medical intervention. That's it. So do you daven for refuah shalema? But they're suffering so much. Do I daven for life? Do I daven for death? Do I daven for refuah? So I'm just pointing out, the Gemara over here, this is the Shras Rabbi say the idea that you're allowed to daven for death. I've often felt the right thing to do is to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Ribono Shel Olam should take care of your loved one. That's what you daven for. Because at the end of the day, I don't know. I have no idea. I believe in miracles. I believe in all of my heart with miracles. But I also believe that the world runs according to a certain level of teva, a certain level of nature. And again, if there's no medical intervention for someone who is at the end stage of an illness, the statistical probability is that they're going to die. Could HaKadosh Baruch Hu turn it around? 1,000,000%. So what am I going to say? They should die, they shouldn't die, they should have a refuah shalema. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take care of my loved one. Take care. Because at the end of the day, that's what every tefillah is anyway. If you distill every single thing that we daven for, at the end of the day, what is it? Hashem, take care of me. Right? I'm davening for parnasa. Maybe I should have parnasa. I think I should have parnasa. Maybe I should. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that if I was dramatically wealthy, right, I didn't win the Powerball. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, you know why? You know why I didn't win it? Because maybe he knows that if I won it, I'd be another one of those lottery winners, right? You know those stories, right? Are those people their life goes down in flames, right? Everything was fine. They were totally happy in the trailer, right? Everything was fine, right? Everything was okay. Now what happens? Now they win the lottery and every single terrible thing that could possibly happen, happens, right? So I think I could do wonderful things with that wealth. I could change the world. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows better. So sometimes the best thing you could daven for is Kadosh Baruch Hu, take care of me. A person who has a relative in this type of situation, a loved one in this situation, sometimes it's not, don't daven for life and don't daven for death. Just ultimately, Kadosh Baruch Hu, please take care of my loved one in the way that only you know how. Rava, Yoma Kadma Dechalish was this interesting Gemara. Rava, when he was ill, the first day that he was ill, Amr Lahon, Lo Tiglu Le'inish, Delo Lisre Mazle. Rava said the first day he was ill, he would be very secretive about it. He would say, I don't want anyone to know that I'm ill so that my mazel shouldn't be compromised. Now, Rava say, what does it mean his mazel shouldn't be compromised? Rava say, if you look at the rush again, the second wide line, Lo Lisre Mazle, the Nafal Tura Chadadu Sakini. Rava say, this is an expression in Shabbos, When the ox falls down, sharpen the knife. Meaning what? It's really hard to get an ox down. Right? If you ever do cow tipping, right? It's a joke, okay? Right? So again, right? It's very hard. It's very hard to get the ox down. Once the ox is down, right? It's already down. Sharpen the knife. So that's an expression that when someone's down on their luck, right? When someone's suffering through hard times, their whole mazel is eroded. So the Resh says, "V'ulai b'vakasha mu'etes shivakshu sono yira'a yitosei chayav." This is incredible. So Rava said like this. Rava said, "Get ready for this." Rava knew there are people who didn't like him. Rava said, "You think to yourself, it's Rava. It's Rava. How could somebody not like Rava?" So Rava was saying, the rule is in life, if you have any level of communal profile, right? Any level, it's always going to be someone, any position of leadership, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like you. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, right? It just means that if you're in the public eye, in some ways, someone's not going to like you. So Rava was concerned like this. Someone who I hear doesn't like, someone who doesn't like me hears that I'm ill, my mazel's already been compromised. Perhaps they could daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to punish me for all of my misdeeds. Rava says, I have misdeeds as well. And therefore, again, I'm in a compromised state. Therefore, on the first day that he was ill, he would not have anything announced. After that, if his illness persisted, he would say, go and announce in the marketplace that I'm ill, that people should daven for me. Listen to this. Whoever hates me will rejoice over the fact that I am ill. And the pasuk says, Uksiv, bin fal ayvecha al tismach. I will say, the pasuk says, when your enemy falls, do not go ahead and rejoice. And the pasuk says, because if you do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will get upset at you. So Rava said, okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will get upset at them. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will get upset at them is how? Is by healing me. So it's okay. So people get happy people become happy that I'm ill. I'll benefit from that. And those who love me, or those who have compassion on me, the boy alai rachami. Ultimately, again, will have rachmanas on me. Incredible. Amar Rav. So we'll say, by the way, this is another piece in general. Sometimes when people fall ill, chas v'shalom, they often are very secretive about it. And there is something to be said about that. In other words, there is something to be said for preserving one's privacy. On the flip side, one loses out on the opportunity to have others daven for them. So there is this balance. So Rava does introduce to us this idea of sometimes, at least initially, especially before someone knows what it is exactly that's going on, there may be an element of keeping things a little bit quieter. But again, once the illness persists, one definitely requires the tefillos of the rabbin, the tefillos of the community, and therefore one should go ahead. One doesn't have to shout it from the rooftops, but somehow to publicize the idea, to make it known that so-and-so needs a refuah shalema, and please daven on their behalf. Amarav, kol mavakir asachola, nitzal medina shel gehenim. Wow. I'll say, anyone who goes ahead and visits the sick, ultimately, again, is saved from Gehenna. Shneimar, Ashrei maskil el dal, biyom ra'a yimaltehu. Ve'in dal el achola. So we'll say literally again, maskil el dal, he who goes ahead and gives his time or gives of his little seichel to the dal, to the chola, will be saved on the terrible day. Terrible day reference to Gehenna. Shneimar, nidala yibtseini. Inami min adinkra, from this pasuk, madua atakacha dal ben amelech, baboker. Ein ra, El Gehenim. Ra means Gehenim Shneimar. Kapal Hashem lema'aneu. V'gam Rasha liyom ra. V'shabos say, so therefore again, halacha l'maisi, if you visit the sick, you're saved from Gehenim. Then biker mascharo, and if you visit the sick, what's your reward? So Gemara says, mascharo kidamar nitzol dino shagam. What do you mean? What's my reward? We just said the reward is you're saved from Gehenim. El mascharo ba'olam hazeh. Shabos say, the fact that I'm saved from Gehenim, that's my reward in the afterlife. What's my reward in this world? Hashem yishmereu. So we'll say, what does this mean? Hashem Yishmereu, Hashem will watch me, Hashem will guard me from the Yitzhahara. Hashem will give me life, meaning Hashem will save me from suffering. Wealth in this world, we'll say everyone ultimately, again, will honor and will give honor to me and take honor in me. They will say, by the way, if you think about it, why is there so much reward? Why is there so much reward associated with Bikur Cholim? It's so fast. We'll say, listen to this. So just watch what's happening over here. If you do Bikur Cholim, we'll say what happens. Do Bikur Cholim, first of all, after 120, you're saved from Gehenna, which for many of us, that's a big thing. That is a very big thing about say, because chances are there's going to be some stint for me. I'm not talking honest. I know what I've done in life, and chances are I'm going to need some cleansing, hopefully before I'm able to go on to go Olam Haba. So the ability to be saved from Gehenna is a very big thing. And then in this world, I will say, listen to the reward in this world. You get saved from the Yetzer Hara, right? Ultimately, again, you get saved from suffering and covered. Incredible. I'll say, what's the pshat? I think the pshat is like this. Bikur Cholim is often a very uncomfortable mitzvah. Bikur Cholim and Nichum Avelim. They're both uncomfortable. They're both, I will say, it's interesting. One of the fascinating things that I often see by Nichum Avelim is, when people really start going to Shiva Minyanim, after they sit Shiva themselves, or someone they love sits Shiva. Because then you realize how crucial it is for people to help, right? Like, in other words, you're at the mercy of the community. You're sitting, person is sitting in their house, right? I need 9 other people to come, right? My friends, not my friends. And so you become you recognize how necessary it is. So I'll say, what's the pshat? Why is it that often, and same thing with Bikur Cholim, by the way, Bikur Cholim, people really only get involved truly in Bikur Cholim if they've either been on the receiving end of it, or ultimately, again, have had a relative who has really needed and seen others come through. Why is that? I'll tell you, I think my theory with this is because it's an uncomfortable mitzvah. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to go to a Shiva home. It is. Because you know what happens? You go in, you sit there. So sometimes you go in there and the Avel's all talkative and great. And sometimes you go there and what happens? Silence. And you don't know what to do. And you don't know do I just get up after 2 minutes? Wait. I'm waiting for it's kind of like exiting WhatsApp groups. In other words, all I need is one person to do it. Just I need that one person to do it. And then there's a flow. It's like Yitzias Mitzrayim. Then we could go, right? And a base Avel, all I need is one person. Just get up. Just get up. Once the person get up, it's I'll just kind of stand behind them, right? We'll walk out together. It's uncomfortable. Bikur Cholim, you go to visit someone who's sick, they're in a hospital bed, they're at home. It's uncomfortable. That's why we naturally avoid these mitzvahs. Meaning, I love Yiddishkeit, and I'll do anything, but as long as it's comfortable. The moment that it makes me uncomfortable is the moment I just don't want to do it until I realize how necessary it is. So Akash Baruch Hu realized this as well. Therefore, the more uncomfortable a mitzvah is, the more schar there is for doing it. Because to do the mitzvah Bikur Cholim, you have to fundamentally move yourself out of your comfort zone. Like Akash Baruch Hu says, you move yourself out of your comfort zone, I'm going to give you more comfort in the afterlife. What's more comfort in the afterlife? No Gehenna. And not only that, I'm going to give you more comfort in this world. I'm going to remove the Yetzer Hara. I'm going to help save you from the Yetzer Hara. Struggle. I'm going to save you from suffering. Struggle. I'm going to go ahead and lift you up. That people, Baruch Hashem, give you covet. People treat you nicely. You go out of your comfort zone. You sacrifice some of your personalistic comfort. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll give you more comfort in the world to come, and I'll give you more comfort in this world. I will say, it's just sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs from us. And we'll say, by the way, I will tell you, the most incredible thing is by Shiva homes. I will say, do you know when people are sitting Shiva, do you know the visits they remember most? I can't tell how many times I've heard, the visits they remember most? Not from their friends, because you always expect your friends to come. It's that guy who you know from shul, who you never said 2 words to. You're like, wow, he came. Those are the most memorable, it's an incredible thing. Those are, because no one expected you to come, because you're not a close friend. You showed up every day for Minyan or whatever, once for Minyan. Well, it's incredible. So you ask anyone who's ever said Shiva, and you ask them the most memorable visits, the people who you never expected to come, and then they show up. Bikur Cholim, you lift up, and it's not even an in-person visit. You lift up the phone, you go out and you call someone, like, wow, that person called me? I didn't even know they knew who I was. Or I know they knew who I was, but we never even shared 2 words, and they cared enough to go ahead and visit me or call me. But it makes all the difference in the world when you're willing to move yourself out of your comfort zone. There is no telling what you could do for the other individual and no telling the reward that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for you. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. The Gemara says, I'm sorry, I didn't finish up. I'm sorry, I stopped mid-sentence. We'll say now that the mitzvah for Bikkur Cholim, sorry, I got a little carried away. Right, the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim is, furthermore, the reward for Bikkur Cholim is, sheyizdamnu lo reim. You get more friends. Now, both say, so where do you see you get more friends? Kinamon, sheripu es saraso. So both say this is the story of Naaman, which we're not going to get into now. Naaman was an Aramean general who was healed from his saras by Elisha. So both say, listen to this. You do Bikkur Cholim, what do you get? You get more friends, which I both say is just the de facto reality, right? You do nice things for other people, people will be there for you as well. And I will say, and you'll avoid negative friends like Rechavam. We'll get to that in just a moment, right? Because Rechavam, I will say, was the son of Shlomo HaMelech. He had bad friends who gave him bad advice. Tanya, we'll say, here we go. This is just, it's almost like too good to have this all in one day. It should be divided up over. Let's listen to this. Tanya, Rishon Elazar Omer, Im yomu lecha yeladim b'nei uzikenim sisar. We'll say, get ready for this Gemara. Let's say, we'll say, if young people tell you you should build, and old people tell you should demolish, listen to older people and ignore the advice of younger people. Why? Shebinyan yeladim stira, ustiras zekenim binyan. Because I will say, the building of young people is demolition, and the demolition of older people is building. The similar davar, I will say, how do we know this? I will say, so just on for similar davar, how do we know this? Rechavam ben Shlomo. I will say, Rechavam was the son of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo dies, Rechavam takes over. I will say, Rechavam decided to go ahead and clean out his father's cabinet, like officers, and he replaced his father's officers, his father's officials, with all of his buddies. What was the problem? They were young, impulsive guys. And they told Rechavam, you know what, if you want to solidify your reign, rule with an iron hand. Rule with an iron hand. Raise taxes, do what you have to. Show them who's boss. Now, Shlomo's former advisors said to Rechavam, they urged him, don't do that. Rule with love. Rule with compassion. Yeah, you have to be stern at some times, but rule with an open heart. And ultimately, again, the people will coalesce around you. Rechavam ignored the advice of his father's advisors, went with his young friend advisors, and the kingdom split. The kingdom split. So we're going to see this in tomorrow's daf as well. Great week ahead of us. This kingdom split, right? Went half of it stayed with Rechavam, and the other half, ultimately, again, the 10 tribes, went with Yeravam ben Nevat. So we'll say, isn't this an incredible idea? That what the Gemara is teaching us is get advice from people who have life experience. Because the worst thing you could do is get advice. We'll say sometimes, I remember, we'll say, this was about, I'm here 20 years in Meretz Hashem this summer. My first year here, we are scholar in residence. I'm not going to say who it was. Scholar in residence. And he got up to speak, and he said to me, oh, you're so young. He said, so young. He's like, how old are you? I said, I don't know, I was 25, 26. So he said, oh, don't worry about it. Youth, it's a mum over. Mum over. So I will say there are two different types of mumin, right? Two different blemishes. There's a permanent blemish, right? And a blemish that goes away, that heals. He says, don't worry, youth is a blemish that heals. Right? And when he said it, I was like, so taken, like, oh, shalom aleichem to you. Welcome to our community, right? So taken aback. And then the truth is that statement has always stayed with me. And it is such a truism. Or there's such profundity in that. You see, when you're young, you think you know everything. And the truth is, then you get older and you realize, I don't know anything now. Forget about when I was young. I knew even less then. That's the Gemara saying. You know what? If you have two different groups of people speaking to you, right? And the young people are telling you to build, and the old people are telling you to demolish, so to speak. It's a metaphor. Go with the old, even though building always looks great, dynamic, growth. Be careful, because sometimes that which looks like it's good, in fact, is not good at all. So make sure what the Gemara is sensitizing us to is all of us need to turn to people for advice, right? Because at the end of the day, if you think that you could solve all of life's challenges on your own without third-party intervention, without third-party advice, you're wrong and you're fooling yourself. All of us need people we could turn to. And I will say, by the way, I want to point out, it could be anyone. The idea the Gemara is saying is, make sure it's someone with life experience. Because sometimes, ultimately, a life experience gives you the greatest amount of knowledge you need. That's why I will say, what do you call an older person? A zakin, right? What is zakin? Zakin stands for Zeh shekana chachma, one who has acquired life wisdom. And I will say, what happens if a person is old, but they've never learned the word of Torah? They're still called a zakin. Why? Because there's a certain amount of wisdom that comes just from living life. Even if you haven't learned Torah, there's a certain amount of wisdom that just comes from life experience. Make sure to get your advice in life from people who have life experience. Incredible. Incredible. I will say, lo lisot inish ketzira, lo betlas shay kadmaisa, lo betlas shnai basraisa dioma. I will say, this is very interesting. A person shouldn't visit the sick in the first 3 hours of the day or the last 3 hours of the day. Why? Because I will say, what's the problem? If you visit someone who's ill in the first 3 hours, the last 3 hours, you're not going to properly daven for them. Why not? Listen to this. Tlas shlai kadmaisa, rav chadaite. I will say, often, in the first thing in the morning, the person who is ill is feeling good. So what happens if you go to visit them in the morning? You're going to see them. You're going to say, oh, they're doing great. So I'm not going to daven for them as much. Right? Basraisa, if you go to visit in the last 3 hours of the day, takif cholsha, often a person is feeling even sicker. And what's going to happen? You're going to say, he's a goner. He's a goner, right? There's no point in, not an exact quote, but there's no point in davening for him, right? He's already past any kind of help. So therefore, don't visit in the first 3 hours, don't visit. Bose, what we're also going to see, Bose, is that there's an etiquette in Bikur Cholim, and making sure that when you do visit, it's at a convenient time for the chola. Shabbos say often a person is getting up in the morning, a chola needs a little bit more time to get themselves together. Or a person is winding down their day, they're often not up for a visit. So again, it's twofold. Number one, you want to make sure, see, it's so interesting. What you begin to see is, why do I visit a sick person? Number one, because it's a mitzvah. Number two, because when I do so, I remove some element of their pain. Number three, if they need something, I'm going to know I could actually physically help them. Number four, when I see the person, when I see him, I'm more motivated to daven for them. So this is really going in number four. In the realm of tefillah, making sure to see the reality of their circumstances. What the Gemara is saying is, in the first 3 hours and last 3 hours of the day, you don't see the reality of their circumstances, right? You're not seeing the real them. It's the middle of the day that you see how they're truly faring. Incredible. Amarav. How do you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sustains a person who is ill? Shene'emar Hashem yisadenu al eresh davai. Both say the pasuk says, literally again, Hashem will go ahead. Excuse me. Hashem will support them. Yisadenu literally means to support, right? Sa'ad, the Gemara is understanding to mean from a lashon of like sustenance. Al eres davai, on their sick bed. Had know that the Shechina resides at the head of the bed of the chola. Literally, I should say, above the bed of the chola. Shneimar Hashem yisadenu al eres davai. Tainam yach. Here, both you have this Bryce that supports this. This is incredible. Hanichnas levakir asachola. If one goes to visit a sick person, lo yeshev al gabi mita. Person shouldn't sit on a bed. V'lo al gabi safsal, not on a bench. V'lo al gabi kisin, not in a chair. Elamis atef yoshev al gabi al karka. Rather, a person should wrap himself in his cloak, sit on the floor. Why? Because the Shechina goes ahead and resides above the bed of the chola. Above the bed of the chola. So the Gemara says, Shneimar Hashem yisadenu al eres davai. Ultimately, again, Hashem will go ahead and literally support the chola while he's in his sick bed. I'll point out on this something very interesting. If you look at the Ran on the left-hand side, so it's interesting. So the Gemara seems to be saying is when you visit a sick person, you can't sit on a bed, you can't sit on a bench, you can't sit on a chair, you have to sit on the floor. It seems to have deference to the Shechina. The Ran qualifies this and he says, this is Ran says, if the chola is sleeping on the floor, the idea is you can't sit higher than the chola. Why? Because what's right above the chola? The Shechina, the divine presence. You can't sit opposite the divine presence. A person has to be lower than the divine presence, the Shechina. So therefore, again, essentially, if the chola is on the floor, then what? I have to be on the floor. If the chola is on the bed, then ultimately, again, I just have to be sitting a little bit lower than the bed. Rabbi said there's also an idea, also a concept of sometimes not sitting on the bed of the chola himself, which is an interesting idea brought down in halacha as well. Out of deference, again, one should always try to be a little bit lower than the chola in order that one is not positioned at the same level as the shechina. But Rabbi say, but what an incredible lesson as well. Isn't it fascinating? You see, Rabbi say, we often think that in times of life adversity, that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not present with me, right? I think if I'm suffering, that means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is removed. Yet what does the Gemara say? When a person is ill, the Shekhinah's right there. The Shekhinah is hovering above the head of his bed, right by his head. That's what the Shekhinah is. It's this incredible reality in life that sometimes in the times that we are suffering most, in the times that we are encountering the most adverse circumstances, those are dafka the times that Hashem is closest. We mistake adversity, meaning that God is absent, and there is nothing further from the truth. Sometimes the greater the sickness, the greater the illness, the more intense the adversity, the closer the Shekhinah actually is to us. An incredible yesod in life. The Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Amar Ravin, Amarav, Mitra b'ma'arava, Sada Rabba Pras. I will say, if you want to know when it's raining in Eretz Yisrael, the greatest witness to the rains of Eretz Yisrael is the Euphrates. Well, it's the Euphrates River. Why Rabbi say? When it rains in Eretz Yisrael, the water trickles from Eretz Yisrael into the Euphrates. So when the Euphrates becomes swollen, that means that what? It's raining in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Upliga de Shmuel, this argues on Shmuel, Damar Shmuel, Nara mikafifa mizbarech. So Shmuel holds that a river, right? A river is normally fed from its own springs. So Shmuel holds that rivers are not really fed by rain; they're fed by their own subterranean springs. So therefore, again, when the Euphrates becomes swollen, that's not from rainwater of Eretz Yisrael, but rather what? That's from its own spring. Upligi the Shmuel. Now, I'll say the truth is, Shmuel argues on himself. What does Shmuel say? Damar Shmuel, Ein hamayim mitarin bezochlin ella. See, you thought I wasn't going to make it. Hey, it's not my first rodeo. Come on, I'll say. So listen to this. I'll say. So get ready. So it says the Gemara like this. So Shmuel says like this. Shmuel says, I'll say, just let me talk to you about this outside for just a moment. I'll say the halacha is like this. A mikvah could be comprised of two things. A mikvah could be a natural body of water. An ocean could be a mikvah. A lake could be a mikvah. A river could be a mikvah as well. Rainwater could also create a mikvah. They will say, but what's the difference? Rainwater could only serve as a mikvah if it's collected and pooled. Flowing rainwater cannot go ahead and serve as a mikvah. Now, flowing natural water, in other words, if you have a river that's a flowing river, that can serve as a mikvah. But halacha l'maisa, rainwater only works as a mikvah if it's pooled and collected. So watch this. So Shmuel says, last time on Amud Aleph again, Tamar Shmuel, Eina mai mitarin bizochalin ella pras biyome tishrei bilvad. Normally, again, he says water cannot go ahead and serve as a mikvah when it's flowing, except the Euphrates in Tishrei. Rabosai, what's the shot with the Euphrates in Tishrei? So remember again, Rabosai, by the time you get to Tishrei means you've gone through the whole summer. At that point in time, the water that's in the Euphrates is no longer rainwater. It's no longer flowing rainwater. So Shmuel is essentially saying that halacha l'maisa, you could use the Euphrates as a mikvah, but only during Tishrei, when you know for sure that it's no longer flowing rainwater, but rather, again, it's pooled, collected water. So Avua de Shmuel, so we'll say just along these same lines, Avua de Shmuel, Avid lahon mikvaos lebanse biyome Nisan. So we'll say, listen to this, as a result of this, very interesting, the father of Shmuel would make mikvaos for his daughters during the days of Nisan. Now, we'll say, the Ran says actually, what he would do is he would make indoor mikvaos for his daughters. Now, we'll say, now what's happening over here? Shmuel's father was concerned that if his daughters would use natural bodies of water for a mikvah during Nisan. I will say, now what's Nisan? Remember, what's Nisan? Nisan already, again, the rainy season is over, right? Because remember, again, Nisan is already the beginning of spring. But again, in many bodies of water, you still have rainwater flowing in. Shmuel was concerned that if his daughters would use mikvahs of natural bodies of water, they'd really be immersing in flowing rainwater. And that's a problem. I will say, now again, rainwater could be used for a mikvah, but when is rainwater, when could it be used? When could it be used? When it's gathered. I will say, by the way, that's how our mikvahos work, right? I have a mikvah that has rainwater, right? It's as long as it's pooled rainwater, totally fine. So Shmuel's father was concerned that if his daughter is used outdoor mikvahos up until Nisan, ultimately again, they would be immersing in flowing rainwater. So what did he do? He dug for them, he made for them indoor mikvahs. Well, how do you make an indoor mikvah? It's not so complicated. Dig a big hole, right? Create a cistern that collects rainwater, and then allow the rainwater ultimately again to collect in the mikvah, in the hole, and you have a mikvah. You have a mikvah. So that's different. Well, what else would he do? Umafzi biyomi tishrei. So Rabbi said, listen to this. Now, in Tishrei already, as we said before, can you use the Euphrates as a mikvah in Tishrei? Can you use the Euphrates? Yes. Why? Because at Tishrei already, there's no concern of flowing rainwater. I will say, but there is a different problem about the Euphrates in Tishrei, which is the bottom of the Euphrates was very muddy. So what was the problem? The concern was that if a woman was using the Euphrates as a mikvah, what's going to happen when she walks in there? Her feet sink into the mud. What's the concern? Chatzitza. So Shmuel's father made like mats for his daughters. So they would take the mat into the Euphrates. They would stand on the mat. This way, their feet wouldn't sink into the mud. And ultimately, again, there was no problem. Ultimately, again, of a chatzitza in the mikvah. So we'll say, so again, just an interesting idea. So therefore, we'll say, just interesting hilchos mikvos. Rainwater works as long as it's collected, right? The moment that it's flowing, it can't work. And therefore, ultimately, again, you have Shmuel saying that halacha l'maaseh you could use the Euphrates in Tishrei. Father of Shmuel made his daughters indoor mikvahs during the rainy season so that they shouldn't run into any flowing rainwater issues, and mats for the Euphrates ultimately again so that the mud should not pose a chatzitzah. So Rabbi say, let's stop over here for today. Let's cap in a few minutes of Mesilas Yesharim. Rabbi say, tremendous hashkach. I just want to tell you tomorrow also, ridiculously good tomorrow, Rabbi say. Let's go. We have just a few minutes. Let's cap. All right, we'll say good morning. So we are picking up today on Sunday. It's a short piece today. Sunday, the 10th of Kislev, December 4th. The Ramchal writes as follows: B'sira, ki achos hakinoch yachem davatayva. Rabbi said this is incredible. The Ramchal writes and see the younger sister, ultimately again of jealousy. What's the younger sister of jealousy? Chemda is desire and taiva. Rabbi said the truth is chemda and taiva often translate in the same way, right? They both go ahead and they mean desire, right? So the younger sister of jealousy is desire. Halohi hamiyages leva adam yamoso. But say a person could be consumed with desire, and we're going to talk about different desires until the day that they die. Ukima amaram zichron levrachas Chazal say, ein adam eis vechati ta'avasa biyado. But say, but when a person dies, he hasn't even gone ahead and acquired all of his titles. In other words, when a person leaves this world, they haven't even acquired half of the things they desire. That's how profound desires. You can spend a lifetime trying to satisfy your desires, and yet by the time you leave this world, you haven't even satisfied half of them. Va'amnam, ikra taiva pone l'rash shnei rashim. I will say generally, taiva, desire, manifests itself in two ways. Ha'echad hu ammaman. We'll say one is a desire for money, and we're going to see desire for money itself even manifests itself in a variety of ways. V'hashini hu hakavod. The second is a desire for kavod, for honor. Shteim ke'echad ra'im ma'od. Both are terrible. The garmim la'adam ra'os rabos, and they cause man terrible pain. Let's analyze. Hine chemdas hamamanhi ha'oseres osav ma'asara olam v'noseres avosos ha'amal va'isek al zra'osav. The desire for money, literally again, oseres, chains one, encumbers a person in the chains, in the shackles of this world, and ultimately puts upon him the yoke of work and azra osav. Also, we're going to see that ultimately the desire for money sometimes makes you a slave to work. He says, Ke'inyan ha'kasef oiv kesef lo yispe kesef. If you love money, you never get enough money. I will say, what happens? I will say, if my life is all about money, then I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get that money. Before we even get into like illicit activity, what it just means is the making of money is going to take priority over anything else in life, even my avodas Hashem. The making of money will become first and foremost in my life. Hine kama tfilos ne'evados, person will miss davening. The kama mitzvos nishkachos, and a person will miss doing mitzvahs. Mipnei rov ha'esik v'egias hamon aschora, to make the sale, to make money. Kosh kein Talmud Torah. See, Rabbi say it's an incredible thing. What the Ramchal is saying over here is, if the essence of my life becomes the pursuit of money, then at the end of the day, Rabbi say, at the end of the day, what? At the end of the day, that becomes a priority. And it takes precedence over davening. And it takes precedence over mitzvahs. And it takes precedence, ultimately again, over avodas Hashem. It takes precedence over everything. That's what happens when a person falls in love with money. He goes on, he says, by the way, I want to point out over here, he's not even talking about Averis. He's not talking about Averis. He's not talking about cheating. He's talking about when the most important thing in my life becomes my parnasa, that takes precedence over everything. So I don't daven in the same way. I don't do mitzvahs in the same way. I don't do chesed in the same way. Because my parnasa, my making of money, takes precedence over all. Money becomes king. Cash becomes king. Often learning is compromised because all I know I need to make money. The Bible says sometimes again, a person even goes overseas to make money. Now, I will say, again, sometimes a person has to travel for money. The shaila just is, am I traveling to make parnasa? Or am I traveling because at the end of the day, I just want more and more and more? And does that desire for more ultimately come at the expense of my ruchnius? Very often, those who are successful in business do not necessarily become Talmidei Chachamim. That doesn't mean that person who is successful can't be a Talmid Chacham. The idea, is that Ramchal is pointing out that sometimes the desire or the pursuit of material success comes at a collateral cost of one's ruchnius. Hiya masores, also l'sakanas rabos, umateshes es kocho b'rova daiga. And I will say, ultimately, again, it could put me, the desire running after money could put me in dangerous situations, often spiritually dangerous situations, and weakens my koach, saps me of my vitality because I'm consumed by worry. Right? I'm always worried about this deal. I'm always worried about that deal. I'm always worried about what's going to unfold in my parnasa. Afilu acher sigo harbe. And I will say, this is true even after I've had a lot of success, Baruch Hashem. I have money in the bank. I've been successful. But still, because I always want more, because I always want to do more, accomplish more, grow more, make more, I am consumed by constant worry over my parnasa. V'chein shaninu, mar benechosim, mar bedages. Chazal said, sometimes Rabbi said, the more you have, the more worry you have. Hiya ma'averes pamim rabos al mitzvos haTorah. Rabbi said, sometimes the pursuit of parnasa ultimately causes me to go ahead and violate tenets of the Torah, right? And sometimes even causes me to violate logical things that I should know better. And I'm both saying, what I want to point out here is something very interesting. The great challenge that Ramchal is outlining over here, I will say, is the fine line between a drive for success and allowing that drive for success to eclipse everything else in life. See, I will say, a person should never settle for mediocrity, even in their parnasa. We should have a drive to be successful. In other words, I will say, I firmly believe, when it comes to your parnasa, you should never strive simply to make enough money to pay your bills. You should strive to be successful. Strive to be successful, because the drive for success is a powerful thing. What Ramchal is saying is, the drive of success itself has to be tempered. And so how do you create that balance? When the drive for success does not encumber my ruchnius. So I'm still davening with the minyan. I'm still going ahead and learning shtark every single day. I'm involved in chesed. I'm doing the things I need to do out my ruchnius. Then I know that the drive for success is not chas v'shalom encroaching on my ruchnius. But the moment that the drive for material success erodes my spirituality, then suddenly there's something wrong. Then I know already, and I will say, how counterintuitive is it, right? As if we think, as if I think that by cutting corners with my spirituality, sometimes I'm going to be more successful. What? I'm a firm Jew. I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds the key to Parnasa. So somehow, by going ahead and diminishing, cutting corners, or eroding my spirituality, I'm going to make more money. I'm going to be materially successful. You see, when you say it, it sounds so foolish. But yet we do this all of the time. I have this tension, right? My Parnasa, my Ruchnius. And whether we realize it or not, often we allow Parnasa to win over Ruchnius. The Ramchal says, what is that from? That's from Chemdas Hamamon. That's from the desire for money. And we have to be so incredibly careful about that. Should you have a desire for material success? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that desire has to be kept in check. The moment that that desire encroaches on my spirituality, that's when already again it's out of control. That's ultimately again when that desire becomes something, that's no longer a desire for success. That's what's called Chemdas Mammon, a desire for money. The moment it becomes a desire for money is the moment that I'm down the wrong path. Have the desire for success, but make sure it never comes at the expense of your Ruchnius. So we'll stop over here for today. Again, I know we're not doing the full part of it. Hashem, we'll pick up. Well, we have more time tomorrow. We'll pick up with this piece of Osai. Shkoyach.
When somebody's gone, to talk to them and say, let go. You're not supposed to do that.
You can do that.
Suffering. I was told that